Welcome to Into the Fire, a Burning Coal Theater Company podcast series.
Hi, this is Jerome Davis. I'm the artistic director of Burning Coal Theater Company, and I'd like to welcome everyone to Into the Fire, the Burning Coal Theater Company podcast series on all things theatrical. And we have quite a theatrical person here today, Dave Wybrow, who is the artistic director of the Cockpit in London, which will be hosting our production, co-producing our production of Tally's Folly by Lanford Wilson in October. Dave, welcome to the podcast.
Well, thank you, Jerry. It's lovely to be here.
Can you start off, Dave, just by telling me and everybody who might be listening, what is the Cockpit? How big is its operation? How many staff do you have, and that sort of thing?
Okay, so it's in central London. It's a purpose-built theatre in the round. It seats 240 people. It was built in 1972, so it's actually open 50 years this year. It's a brutalist 60s functionalist standalone building with seats on all four sides and some studios upstairs and a nice bar. And that's about it. It's tucked away in a little side street just off Lisson Grove, which is near Marylebone, which is near things like Baker Street and the Sherlock Holmes Museum and Regent's Park and Madame Tussauds and all sorts of other stuff. But we're by far the most interesting little box on the street.
Absolutely. Dave, what's the community like around the Cockpit? It seemed to me a very diverse community when I was there in the past. Can you talk a little bit about that?
Yeah, sure. I mean, it's the thing that I always say is that it's a community of communities. There is every possible language. I can't think of a language I haven't heard on Church Street, which is the local street just outside. It's very, very diverse. It's on the fringes of the West End. It's a traditional stopping off place. Harrow Road, which comes down just near the Cockpit, was where, for one thing, Tyburn Tree was, and it was the bit just outside centre of London that was full of itinerants and people travelling to work in Kent from Ireland used to stop in this area, and the whole area has got a transitory, temporary, shifting population that in some ways settles and in some ways never does. There's a continual churn of nationalities. You can always tell where the latest war is by the nationality of the chef in the kebab shop down the road. Things change from time to time. It's an extraordinarily vibrant area and very diverse. So we do work in English, but we also do quite a lot of work in other languages, and a bit in Arabic and some in French and some in other Middle Eastern languages, Farsi sometimes. There's a big Iranian population around here. Mm-hmm. So we do a bit of that. Most of the time, though, we're serving a population that travels across London to come to this particular venue because we do stuff in the round, and we favour work of ideas and disruptive panache, as we always say. So if something that's got something interesting to say and an interesting way to say it, that's really our calling card, and that attracts various diverse audiences in addition to the diverse audiences that live around here.
How long have you been at the Cockpit?
About 300 years, Jerry. I think I came in, I can't remember the year I came in, but it was 90 something. And I think I've been here about 27 or 28 years now.
Well, and you came in as the artistic director, is that correct?
Well, the place was built by a very enlightened socialist democratic education authority that used to run education in London. And they built it. And then Margaret Thatcher, you might remember her, she didn't like this socialist educational authority and she disbanded it. And so the Socialist Education Authority, which used to run all the education in London, in desperation gave the theatre. They'd built it specifically to enfranchise young people. The area this is built in was, at that time, had the highest crime rate in the country. And they built, and being socialists, they thought, well, what do you do with lots of young people that are getting up to no good? Well, you give them art. And so they built a theatre for them. And it kind of worked. So for years, the place did a lot of work with local young kids. Mm-hmm. When the socialist educators were thrown out, they gave the theatre to a local college, and that college never knew what to do with it until one day it decided to give it to me, and I've been there ever since, which was quite good for it and really good for me, I have to tell you.
Can you tell me a little bit about yourself, Dave? You had been involved in theater much longer than that, I presume. And how did that come about? Where are you from originally?
I'm a Londoner. I didn't start off in theatre. I started off in journalism and all sorts of other things. Like a lot of us during the 70s, 60s, 70s, 80s, I was traveling a lot. I didn't really get involved in theatre till I was about 30. But then I did, and I discovered it was my medium. And I've been involved with it ever since. It's not the only thing that I've done. I haven't just been here, sitting here, twiddling away for 26 years. I've done some other stuff as well. I've got another strand, which is human rights. And I've worked for various times with refugees most of my life. And somehow this arts and human rights thing kind of goes together, and that probably accounts for the artistic policy of the Cockpit. I might say when I say the college gave it to me, they didn't give it to me. They just invited me to come and run it, and I've been ever since.
And the college is what is the name of the college?
It's called United Colleges Group now. They're a further education college. So again, it's a vocational college rather than a university. Although, in fact, the theatre as it is now works with a whole lot of different universities alongside professional companies, and it's mostly professional companies, but we do work a lot with college groups and universities as well.
Mm-hmm. What did your parents do?
Oh. I'll have to think about that. My father was training to be, he died when I was 6, and he was training to be a dentist at that time. Bear in mind, both my parents went through the Second World War, as yours probably did, but they were in London. So my father was in the Blitz during the war on a stretcher party. My mother was in a reserved occupation because she used to work for a dairy, Express Dairy, and she was an accountant for that dairies firm. They were Londoners. They liked the arts. I've got all their books downstairs. They used to give each other poetry books. They used to read to each other. They used to read poetry to each other. Mm-hmm. They used to. I've got the entire works of Tennyson that he gave her one Christmas downstairs. They were average Londoners, really, with a little bit of a shine for literature and poetry. Yeah. They're both dead now.
That's very similar to my upbringing. My parents had very few books that they owned, but they were constantly going to the library. And when I was about 6 or 7, my father paid me and my twin brother $20 to memorize "If" by Kipling, which we promptly did, and I can still recite large parts of it. So yeah, that's fascinating. And the community that you grew up in, was it it doesn't sound like you grew up in a particularly affluent area. Was it would you call it middle class or lower middle class, or?
Tricky. They were. My mother came from quite a middle class background. Mm-hmm. My father did also. They came from Suffolk, and they were a bit fallen gentry, really. But my mother's family were. My great grandfather was an inventor. They're all a bit weird, but famously, my grandfather was an inventor and made a lot of money, but he was also a gambler and he lost it all. They had houses in Suffolk and they lost all that. He lost the family. My fortune was lost by my grandfather on Newmarket races. My father, his lot were I don't know what they were, to be honest, because he died when I was 6, so I was never able to investigate it very thoroughly. But they came to London and I grew up in, to begin with, rented accommodation in Harrow. They rented and then they got it together and they managed to get a house in Wealdstone, which was a little Victorian, 2 up, 2 down, working class, definitely a working class area. And they were always a little bit, they were probably a little bit more classy than the areas that we lived in, if by inclination and aspiration. They were decent working class people, really.
Did you have siblings, Dave?
No, I don't have any siblings. I don't have anybody. No.
There's a Graham Wybrow who works in the theater in England, whose name pops up from time to time. I think he spells it slightly differently than yours, but I had always wondered if maybe there was a connection there.
I don't know that if he spells it with an H, probably not. There's one family of Wybrows, and there was someone teaching English at Oxford for a while, and there's another mob of them down in the West Country. But I don't actually know. I don't know any other Wybrows. Weirdly, I'm a bit short of family. I mean, if anybody wants to be my closest family, they're welcome to apply. I don't have any brothers or sisters. Actually, Jerry, I was thinking of you. Would you like to come on board as part of my family?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. Do I have to grow the handlebar mustache? Would be my question.
No. In fact, I wouldn't allow it. But you have to stick with it.
One's enough. Okay, Dave. So you said you were about 30 when you started working in theater. Was that the first time that you had an experience in theater that was meaningful to you? Or, a lot of people talk about their first production of whatever, Cinderella or whatever, that caused them to see a place for themselves in the world. Is that how it happened with you, or was it something else that brought you aboard?
I kind of always liked theatre. I was a theatrical kid. I used to put on little shows in the back garden and invite the local kids round to see it and charge them sixpence. I was that sort of kid. I was a bit of a showman as a kid. And then one of the things I did before I got involved in theatre, and as I say, I was a bit of a journalist. I did all sorts of things, actually. But one of the things, I was a roadie, or a sort of rock and roll roadie, and I worked with Pink Floyd. And I kind of got to like working on big events. And I remember I worked on The Wall when we were touring The Wall, Pink Floyd were touring The Wall. And I kind of like that, where you put a lot of effort in and then it happens, then it all goes away aspect of theatre. You can break yourself doing a piece of theatre and there's nothing to show afterwards except the sound of the applause ringing in your ears, and I kind of like that. And then what happened was I guess while I moved from out the working class suburb where I grew up, to Islington in central London. And it was at the time when pub theatre was taking off.
Right.
And there was a Canadian called Dan Crawford who started the King's Head in Islington, which was the first pub theatre. And it was the first of many. I mean, this was the start of a wave of fringe theatre. And I was there at the start of that. And the first show I think I saw that I thought, wow, was a show called Mr Joyce is Leaving Paris, and it was at the King's Head. It's a little show, I can't even remember who it's by, but it's a great little show. It's about James Joyce, about him leaving Paris, and they staged it beautifully, and it was acted beautifully, and it was absolutely transported me, and I thought, this is amazing. And I kind of kept that thing for theatre all the way through, and then alongside that, I was very interested in documentary film because I'd started working as a journalist. I was a trainee news reporter on Fleet Street, in fact, for an agency on Fleet Street. And so I thought, well, this is good, this news reporting, but I'd really like to be making documentaries. And eventually I found, when I was 30, I was out in Australia, that Thatcher that notorious woman, started cutting the grants, because she got grants to go to college when I was a kid. So she started cutting the grants. I thought, I better go back and do something serious with my education. So I went back to England and I found one course that combined film and theatre. And I thought, I can do my documentary, and also this theatre stuff is fun. I could do some of that too. But then when I got on it, in fact, I realised that film is quite an isolating medium in a way. I really like the convivial, everybody's got a view of the mountain thing that you get with a group of people putting together a piece of theatre. The idea that you can see it taking shape when everybody's working on it, you can see it in the room. The trouble with film is it's in the mind of the director and the editor, and everybody else is standing around just doing their little bit. And that, as a process, didn't float my boat. What floated my boat was this group creative effort, and the occasional moments of magic that become possible when it goes right. It's just absolutely transporting and magical, and I just love that. So that's what happened. But it was Mr Joyce's leaving Paris at the King's Head, working with Pink Floyd on the wall, and rocking up at this amazing college that happened to teach, that did a joint degree in film and drama, and I did both. And did very well there, and I've been doing it ever since. In fact, I've been doing it both ever since, and human rights as well. So I went on then and did the MA in human rights at Sussex, but that was not until I was about 14 something.
Roger Waters was on his tour here in Raleigh 2 weeks ago. I had just come back from the West Coast that same day, and I couldn't, because I had come down with COVID, so I couldn't go to see it, but and I may have missed my opportunity because he's well into his 70s now, but that's one I would love to have seen. How old were you when you saw the play again is
Mr. Joyce's Leaving Paris? I think I was about 18. I think I was about 18. It was at the King's Head, because I know I was working at the King's Head behind the bar, the King's Head Theatre pub in Islington.
Yeah.
And I wasn't old enough to be working there. It was illegal, because I had my 18th. You're not allowed to work at a pub. Well, you are actually, but you're not allowed to drink until you're 18. But I know that I had my birthday in the pub. They said, "You're not 18 then?" I said, "No." I said, But I know that, so I think I was 18 and I saw Mr Joyce's Leaving Paris. I wish I could remember the author.
How many birthdays since then have you had in pubs, Dave?
In what? In pubs? I can't remember that. I wouldn't tell you it.
I ask about that because I find that so many theater people are able to pinpoint the moment, when something became possible for them in their life, and I guess I want to ask the question. You do a lot at the Cockpit. You see a lot of young people coming through with shows. Do you think they're having that same experience today, where a play surprises them and moves them, or do you think something else is happening today? The reason I ask is that I don't hear a lot of that talk among young people, and perhaps I'm asking the wrong ones, but it feels almost like that they're looking at theater as they have a checklist, and if the checklist gets checked off, then they like the play, and if it doesn't get checked off, they don't. And I wonder if that's if the same kind of experience is being had today by young people as was had in yours and my youth.
I think it is, because I still find I'm able to identify with a lot of the emerging companies that come through the doors of the Cockpit. So I probably get a distorted sample, because the Cockpit is for people that want to do theatre. They're crazy to do theatre, and those people have all got the white light, the mad white light in the eyes, and they've all had the moment. So I think there's plenty. I think the major difference between our generation and the new generation is that we used to sit in our houses and think, God, there's a massive world out there, and in my bedroom is absolutely nothing, and I really want to get out in that big outside world.
Right.
And now people sit in their bedrooms with a huge world on the, available digitally, and their immediate surroundings outside their house may or may not be that interesting to them. So young people have a broader range of spaces to exist within and explore, because they have online space as well as real space. And that, I think, probably means they're spread a bit more thin. They've spread a bit more thinly. I mean, when I was 18, pubs and the pub theatre and pub rock, actually, in London, like bands in pubs, they were the big things. There weren't really that many nightclubs. There was one, Dingwalls, that was open till 3 o'clock in the morning. But most of what you did was either parties, listening to records. Remember those round things that go round. The things we did. It was much more limited. And so there's a lot of entertainment, a lot of interaction happening online as well as in the real world. I don't think it's replaced the interaction that happens in the real world. London is buzzing with people out doing stuff and going to theatre. I think there are people. I think it still is happening. But then I'm probably getting all the people that have had the theatre moment, the theatre bell's gone off. I think. Yeah, most people here, and there's a lot of young people work here and come through here. And like this New York, the New York Voices series that we started to build around, really, Tally's Folly, which just looks at contemporary New York writers on the basis that there was an old school of New York writers, Albee and whoever, Lamford Wilson. And now there's a new school of New York writers, and a lot of them are not male, they're not white, but there's an awful lot of people, right? But the young people that come through that I've got working on that are absolutely fanatical about these writers, and they're just reading the plays. That's really surprised me. Frankie, who's working on this New York Voices series of readings, is absolutely fanatical about finding fantastic plays, and she really does find some good plays.
Good.
Can
you tell me just a little bit more about New York Voices? What's the scope of it, and what do you want to accomplish with it?
It started off as a sort of marketing platform for Tally's Folly, to be honest. I just thought, well, we better say why we're doing Tally's Folly, and then I seriously got interested in the people that are working, the current wave of Pulitzer Prize winners, or the people that are up for Tonys and Pulitzers and what have you now, are completely different to the old. We're not talking Sam Shepard or any of these. So and that became very interesting to me, because a lot of the plays are amazing. And what now going to happen is I'm not going to be able to remember the list of plays that we're doing or their authors. But there is a great play called The Clean House.
Sarah Rule.
Yeah. So these. I mean, that's an astonishingly theatrical play.
Yeah.
And so I'm really intrigued to see that, and it's a great. We're going to read that if we possibly can,
and that will happen around Tally's Folly, and around you have a musical coming in December, I believe. Is that well?
We've got a musical about Rita Hayworth coming in, or rather about Rita Hayworth as a manufactured sort of entertainment
icon.
Product. Icon, and we're going to run just a couple of readings a month all the way through to January.
Great.
And what I'm hoping is that I'm surprised how much interest there is. We've had a lot of coverage on it, as you know, Joe, because and the people in the building are really excited about it. It's really taken off. So I'm thinking that if we get some of these plays and they turn out to be doable, that we might look at producing one next year or something.
That's great. Do you think this will be my last question for you, Dave, unless there's something else you want to talk about? Do you, knowing the plays that you're you're curating this series, New York Voices. Callies Folly is by a seminal New York playwright, one of the founding playwrights of the off Broadway movement in the late 50s into the mid 60s, and then the house playwright at the legendary Circle Repertory Theater, which really was the core of the off-Broadway movement into the 70s and 80s. Does Tally's Folly fit to what the Cockpit does and wants to do? And if so, why do you think it does?
It fits because it's as you say, it's an extraordinarily good example of a very well put together, well written play that kind of enabled New York to acquire a reputation as a beacon of work that was quite often critical of America, or that critiqued America, or that examined America in a particular country. New York was full of writers that weren't from New York, but they went to New York and then turned around and looked back at where they come from and wrote about that.
Tennessee Williams.
Absolutely. So that's why it fits so well, because it is precisely that really well worked, well considered piece of work that looks specifically at American specificity. This is this place, this time. These are these people. This is how they think. This is what they do. And because both of the people in Tally's Folly are out of place a bit, they're both out of place, and so that just makes it relevant. It's not like a piece of down-home naturalism.
Right.
These are characters that are travelling through the play in search of something, and that kind of lifts it out of just being a little bit of old,
Yeah, it's not exactly a slice of life drama, and it's at least Lanford Wilson like of his plays, and plays because of that, I think.
So it fits because it is that it's what New York enabled writers to do. Was to do that kind of work just by being a place with a big population of theatre goers and the it was a constellation, wasn't it? You had critics that were interested in being voluble star critics, and you had theatres that were and you had musicals that was and you had big crowd of salaried, educated people that were literary and so it was a sort of golden theatre moment. And New York was definitely a beacon of new writing at the same time as it was a beacon of sort of avant-garde performance. So it wasn't just the playwriting, it was also the performance. And somehow, to me, they kind of go together. And it's just interesting. And the question is, well, what's going on now? And I realised that I didn't know who was writing in New York now. I don't know. I didn't know any. I didn't know about the Clean House. I didn't know about Yell. I didn't know these people. So it's been an opportunity for me to read some stuff, really, and I've been really pleased that I did.
There's a ton of it. It's the work that's opening up right now here and in London and in other places as well, Canada, Australia. There's just a wealth of material, and at least until Miss Truss gets a hold of it, a wealth of at least enough funding to make sure that those types of opportunities continue to remain for younger generations coming up with new ideas about how to do things, which is great and what it should be. Dave, thank you for joining us today on the podcast. I know you have 74 things on that you need to deal with right now, because you always do, and rather miraculously you managed to do them all. So we're looking forward to seeing you in a few weeks and looking forward to being back at our home in London, which is the Cockpit. Thank you for joining us.
We can't wait to see you, Jerry, and the set is going to look a treat. I promise you that. I think the set's going to be a folly.
Right, that's great.
Thanks for the opportunity.
Okay. Say hello to the group, and we will be there in a few weeks.
See you in October. Ciao for now.
Thanks so long.
Thank you for listening. Our production of Callies Folly at the Cockpit in London will run from October 13th through the 29th. For tickets and information, visit us at burningcoal.org or give us a call at 919-834-4001.